Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. I'm Taylor Dahl, and we are coming off our bye week. Got a little rest. I feel like it's the first time in a long time that the Bears are coming off their bye week with a winning record. I also think it's a long time that I've actually wished that it was a bye week yet. The last few years, I feel like by the time that the bye week got here, I was so ready for it and I needed a break. This year, I was really missing Chicago football, especially after the last few weeks of offense that we've seen and the defense now for many games leading into last season. So we are here to preview the Bears Washington game. Normally I have my monster of the week, but because it's a bye week, obviously do not have one of those. But I did just release a Caleb Williams episode. I talked to both his high school coaches, his high school head coach, and his high school offensive coordinator, Coach Randy Trivers and Coach Danny Schechter. And so that episode is out to where you can just get to know Caleb a little bit, go back to his past. Also, Randy Trivers goes into some of the things he's seen so far in Caleb this season, why he thinks that this development after 3 weeks has started to really pick up. So that's a fun one. Go ahead and listen to that on Second City Gridiron on the YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. But I think also I released another one. I talked to Tim Jenkins. Tim Jenkins, obviously the former part of Tim Jenkins' elite former college quarterback and NFL quarterback. He breaks down a lot of film for the NFL quarterbacks. Obviously, he's done all of Caleb's games so far this season, and it's been really fun to follow along with that. So that is also up on Second City Gridiron YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. He breaks down Caleb Williams for me, kind of this rough start to now these last 3 games. He also breaks down Shane Waldron's offense, some of these other weapons. Roma Dunze, all of the things that come to what has been the last 3 weeks for the Bears and how things have slowly started to get a little better in that aspect. So head over and listen to some of those. Hopefully this week we have a new fun monster that I haven't got to talk about yet. I would love a really true. We've had the 112 touchdown Rome game. I would love another one. But at this point, I think that it's seems like this Bears offense is very unpredictable. One week it's DeAndre Swift, one week it's Rome, one week it's DJ, week it's Keenan, one week it's Cole. I like that. I think it's very beneficial for Caleb. No team can come in here and game plan for 1 or even 2 guys. They have to game plan for 4 or 5 guys, which I think is definitely what is leading to some of the success offensively. But today I'm going to be talking to Craig Hoffman. He is the host of the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. He covers the Washington Commanders. So I'm going to have him on and we are going to talk about, obviously, the big storyline is Jayden Daniels. Will Jayden play? How serious is this injury? I do want to get into some of the things when it comes to, are they a little worried? We see the videos all over Twitter right now of Jayden just getting rocked in college and how sustainable is that in the NFL with the size of these guys coming at him at this level? And is there any concern there? We'll talk about that. Obviously, Cliff Kingsbury is another big storyline. He was with Caleb at USC last season. His offense so far in Washington is working really well with Jayden Daniels. But when he went down last week, it was also working really well with Marcus Mariota, who does have he doesn't have the arm Jayden has, but he does have the mobility. So that's something that I think they can continue on with Marcus Mariota, which may be something that the Bears should be something that the Bears focus on this week. And so that's another one. Also, Caleb's return home to Washington. He's from the DMV area. And so kind of he said he's only been back a few times since he left high school. So it's his return there. And I'm sure that he'll have some, not only Bears fans there, but just people who watched him in high school and have kind of seen him grow from this high school player to now the starting quarterback in the NFL. So a lot of fun things going on this weekend. I truly do wish that Jayden Daniels was playing. I think that, number one, it would be a test that I would like to see the Bears defense have. We faced, outside of CJ Stroud, a bunch of quarterbacks. So I personally would like to see them go up against an offense that looks like Washington's offense and Jayden Daniels. And I think in reverse, you want to see Jayden Daniels go against a good defense, because he faced the Ravens, who up front are a good defense, but their secondary is one of the worst secondaries in the league, or one of the bottom tier secondaries in the league. So he still didn't really have a challenge when it came to that. So I am a little bummed at seeing him. It looks like it's trending towards him not playing. It's ribs. I think a lot of times when it comes to the ribs, it's the concern of re-injury. It's the concern of, body movement. And when he's releasing the ball, I think some of it also is just the fact of this Bears defense is really good. They've been able to get to the quarterback. Do you want to risk a re-injury? And also the pain factor. A lot. Sometimes those ribs are just how painful is it in those moments, and can you tolerate that pain? So we will see. And we will talk to Craig and see his answer on that. But a lot, like I said, a lot of storylines, a lot of fun things going into this game this weekend. But I think the Bears have 3 winnable games coming up, honestly, when it comes to Washington and the Patriots and the Cardinals. If you go and you win those games, next thing you know, you're 7-2, and you go into the gauntlet that you have at the end of the season with obviously the NFC North, and then you mix in the Niners, who right now look beatable because they're so beat up, and the Seahawks, whose defenses have been struggling, looks winnable. So I mean, you look at it and you go into that 7-2, and you split the division, hopefully, at least, and then you win one or both of those Niners Seahawks games, and you're looking at a 10, 11, 12 win season, which at this point, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but if you play the way you have the last 3 weeks, yes, bigger tests coming, but especially these next 3 weeks, I think are important, and just getting that record up to that number so that the gauntlet isn't so have to win at the end of the season once week 11 comes and you face the Packers and beyond that. So anyways, I do want to get over to the Craig Hoffman interview, and we will talk to him. But first, I want to give a little love to Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports, which I feel like that sounds like a win-win to me. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. You can compete against players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats. You could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog Fantasy. I wanted to talk about one of the new features they have. It's called Red Zone Rush. It's a game that you won't find anywhere else. You just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes and left for no. Literally as simple as that. Plus, your entry will automatically be boosted, and you'll get 51% profit boost when you play. I also think another cool thing is that Underdog puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry, and you can tap, or you can go over and tap the win now button to cash out whenever you want. So that part's up to you. Also, some of the promos, it's currently Boostober on Underdog, where there's a promo to play nearly every day. So keep an eye out on that. Also wanted to go over to maybe some of the things this weekend. I've mentioned the last few weeks, some higher or lowers. And I think it won this weekend, especially after the year he had last year against Washington. DJ Moore, that higher 56.5 receiving yards, looks pretty good to me right now. I also think we've been waiting for that Rome Odunze game. So you may want to go to that higher or lower and tap that higher on 2.5 receptions, higher 2.5 receptions for Rome Odunze. Lots of ways you can go with that. So just keep some of those things in mind. Remember that you can download the app today and use code CITY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's CITY, CITY, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. And so some of the things that I was talking about earlier, you can select higher or lower on your favorite players and cash in on Underdog. So keep that in mind. That's an easy route to go this weekend. So you must be 18 and up, 19 and up in Alabama and New England, 19 and up in Colorado for some games, 21 up in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. And if you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. If you're in Arizona, that's 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. If you're in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-8778-HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Underdog Fantasy. All right, guys, let's head over on to this interview with Craig Hoffman. Again, he hosts the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, covering the Washington Commanders. So let's get to know this team a little bit more, even beyond Jaden Daniels. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. Chicago Bears coming off a bye week with a winning record. That's been a very long time since I've been able to say that. And so we are continuing on the preview games, which this weekend obviously is going to be the Chicago Bears versus the Washington Commanders, both having really solid starts to the season so far. And Craig Hoffman, he is the host of the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, is joining me today. So thanks so much, Craig, for hopping on.
Taylor, it's a pleasure. Happy to do it. Happy to talk a little Bears Commanders. Game of the week in the NFL. Exactly what the CBS executives were hoping for. Marcus Mariota versus Caleb Williams. Let's do it.
I know, and that's what honestly, I'm a little bummed about that because I think obviously this game was flexed to that 425 spot because it was Jaden versus Caleb, and it doesn't look like we'll get that. But let's start there. Updates with Jaden Daniels. It's ribs, obviously. He
Yep.
suffered in the game last week. Mariota came in and still played well. It looks like the offense is still functional, which is a testament to good play calling, a testament to other things around, and we'll get to some of that. But let's start with Jaden. What are they saying about those ribs? And is it this week? Is it longer? Do we know?
We don't know for sure. As of now, we are not expecting him to play, I would say. He missed practice Wednesday. He's missing practice on Thursday as well. But this is a guy who has been very, very good about developing a routine and can mentally prepare without having to be at practice because of all people have probably heard about the virtual reality stuff that he does. So they can load up all these plays and have Cliff Kingsbury in his ear and he can see defenses and study and do all these things without actually having to throw. And so if they're trying to rest that rib and still get him mentally ready, he can do a lot of what they're doing. They're also a team that relies a lot on walkthroughs, not just about what they do in practice. And he can participate in the walkthroughs and still be listed as a DNP. So I think there's a chance that he's limited in practice on Friday or even a full practice on Friday. They test that rib, see how he can do, and he plays on Sunday. But I would say it's probably unlikely. They're probably going to be super duper conservative. And if they think that there's a chance of re-injury, nevertheless, that he can't actually perform, my guess is they probably wait a week. And to be clear, Taylor, I'm super bummed about this too, because
Yeah.
not only is it like the exciting matchup 1 versus 2, Chicago's the best defense that Washington's played this year outside of Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to see kind of what lessons this team took from the loss to Baltimore and how they go against what's a very different stylistically, albeit very good defense in Chicago, and kind of what that looks like with Jaden Daniels. As I'm sure every single week is this referendum that you're having on Caleb Williams, and you're like, okay, well, what does he learn? What is he doing? How's he progressing? And the harder the test, the more you learn. And unfortunately, we're not going to get to learn anything, probably, it looks like, about Jaden this week. But I still think we can learn as a lot as we'll get into about this offense and the Cliff Kingsbury of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that when we talk about it, the Ravens offense, I mean defense, obviously up front is really good. When it comes to the defensive line, their linebackers, their secondary not so much. So I think a lot of people were looking forward to seeing Jaden Daniels go up against one of the better secondaries in the league in Chicago, and I think same for Chicago is going against because it's been a lot of quarterbacks outside of maybe CJ Stroud. So same for the defense. Let's see the Bears defense go up against a guy who's been able to kind of just throw all over and run all over a lot of defenses. So I am bummed too. And I know right now some of it is like this Jaden versus Caleb and who's better and who's this. To me, it's fun. Like we need this young group of quarterbacks to come in, and you have Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. But some of the guys that we were expecting, Craig, to be that next in a Trevor Lawrence maybe haven't reached that as fast as they thought. Jalen Hurts may seem like he's going backwards a little. You're waiting for someone like Justin Herbert where he's had his moments, but it hasn't just completely spiked. So you want that. I feel like it's fun. You want Drake May and Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams to all be good and fun. Am I alone in that?
No, definitely
Yeah.
not. I did laugh on the Monday night game where Justin Herbert throws that sick ball right in front of the pylon and then it gets punched out.
Yeah.
My pal Nate Tice, who now is with Yahoo, he's just like, this is Justin Herbert's career in one
Yeah.
play. Like make an outstanding throw and then just have it go
Ripped
straight
away
into
from you.
straight into the gutter. But I think you're right. Like who's the next wave that's going to challenge Mahomes? And CJ
Yeah.
Stroud certainly felt like he emerged on the scene as a prime candidate last year. He's still been largely very good this year. Although last week, notwithstanding, he threw for 86 yards.
Yeah.
Yikes. But Jaden looks like the real deal. And Caleb looks like he is quickly progressing. And I think, Drake May, even the first 2 games,
Yeah.
like there's a lot we were like, oh, that's not good. But there's a lot we were like, wow, this dude is sick. And so I think that's what you're going to see is like these 3 guys are all number 1 picks in most drafts. And they went 1, 2, 3 in this one because of the presence of the other 2. And so I think that seeing that next level of development, seeing as offenses change, we're also kind of in an age of defense right now. Like the
Yeah.
league is cyclical. Offenses adjust, eventually defenses catch up, then offenses change again. And we're kind of in a defensive thing right now. And what these new young quarterbacks bring is going to continue to shape the league. And I think on the Washington side of it, you're seeing a lot of really like NFLized, if
Yeah.
that's a word that I can invent on the fly here, NFLized college concepts. Like you're taking a lot of things that Cliff Kingsbury learned in college, from the spread run game to some of the RPO stuff, and he's now saying, okay, here's the fundamentals of why it works. What happens if we take some NFL concepts and kind of apply those to the base concept of why the thing works, and what you're getting is spectacular. And so
Yeah.
I think it's been really, really cool, and I think you're seeing some of that too in Chicago. On I do a podcast with Logan Paulson, who's former Commanders tight end but also former Bears tight end
Mhm.
for a year, and Logan and I did our preview this morning, and he was talking about some of the things he saw on tape from Chicago, where they are taking some very regular NFL concepts and dressing them up in the ways that Caleb is more used to from the college game. And he's like, I know that sounds pejorative because we see like college offense.
Yeah.
There's the famous Cam Taylor Brick quote from, earlier this year, the Bengals corner who said that about Kingsbury's offense.
Yeah.
And it's like we see that as pejorative, but if it works, the whole point is to get yardage and score. And
Yeah.
I think both Shane Waldron and, to a larger extent, if I'm being honest, Cliff Kingsbury are doing that very, very, very well in 2024.
Yeah, and Cliff and Jaden were able to do it right out the gates. It took a few weeks for Chicago to be able to do it. I think part of that was they had a little bit of training wheels on Caleb, and I think because they had so many weapons and a good defense, that they were like, we don't have to unleash Caleb right now. We don't have to throw him out into the fire. And then you get to the Colts game and he throws the ball 50 times, and you're like, maybe he can do it. Like maybe you can have this guy ask a little bit more out of Caleb Williams. And that's what kind of started happening. But let's talk about Jaden Daniels, some of the good things. And I really do hope he plays this weekend. And even if he doesn't, we will get to Mariota and some of the things that he can do in this offense too. But Jaden Daniels, when you're talking about his start so far, Craig, I feel like he's one of those guys. Obviously, he's won week after week of rookie of the week, and we're seeing that happen. And you're seeing him put all these numbers. He obviously is mobile. That's one of the things you knew about him. But what to you is working so well when it comes to what Cliff Kingsbury is planning around Jaden's strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, I think it's something that it's interesting hearing you frame Caleb's season that way, because I think like while they didn't ask him to like throw the ball 50 times, the throws they asked Caleb to make earlier in this year were so high leverage all the time. And it's like actually what he needed was training wheels, because all they did was ask him to ride a bike and he kept falling over. And
Yeah.
he's still, even though last week he threw one pass past 20 yards in the air, he still is like top 5 in the league in 20 plus yard throws down the field. Whereas here, what they've done is really try to make things simple for Jaden. And he is an incredibly fast processor. And I think that's been the kind of the cool thing, is because that first week against against Tampa, there's a ton of screens. And it's just like, hey, one thing we know you can do from college is read the box count. If you're light over here, throw the bubble. If you're light over here, hand the ball off to the running back. And they did that a lot. And then they started to add in some of the quick game. And then they started adding in some other easy throws to try to make it so that he wasn't leveraged and he's not having to drop back 5-step, 7-step drops and read NFL defenses and full field reads. And then all of a sudden, I think the reasons people got so excited after the Baltimore game, even though it was a loss, was in that game, Baltimore was able to stop the run in a way that other teams have not. He's in more third and longs. He's in bad down and distances. And he drops back as a drop back passer 20 times in that game. And he makes good decision after good decision and good throw after good throw. And ultimately, it wasn't quite enough. But to see the quarterbackiness of it all was really, really impressive. And so I think what's been great for Jaden is they've leveraged his running ability very well. They've run the football to make sure that he's not stuck in drop back pass a lot. They're in good down and distances. Cliff has been very creative in terms of some of the trick plays or little tweaks and things that really steal yardage. And then Jaden is an outstanding processor who's really accurate, who can read all areas of the field, and is just playing outstanding football. And so until really he got rolled up on last week and suffered this rib injury, like things were going swell. And even that was on a 46-yard run that just
Yeah.
ends, unfortunately, poorly, where he's probably going to miss this week's game.
And that is funny seeing like the opposite. That's why I like doing these podcasts, kind of seeing the opposite views of what people are seeing. Because when I go back and I talk about Caleb and how I felt like they had training wheels, I think the beginning, number one, they couldn't run the ball. DeAndre Swift, it took 3 weeks for them to
Mm.
really figure out the run game. So I think a lot of those deep passes were because Caleb kind of had to. There was nothing like he was kind of just launching it downfield. That's something that I think we were confident Caleb could do. Knew he could do kind of these superhero and run around and scramble and launch the ball downfield. So to me, them not asking to just fully uh, take the offense as his own is maybe more so what I mean when I say they had the training wheels. In the
Yep.
last 3 weeks, you've seen a lot, like he's controlling everything pre-snap. He's calling out everything that you need to do. He's calling out coverages. He's calling out everything, all this disguises, blitzes, everything. And that's just something you didn't really see the first 3 weeks. And it almost felt like that opened up. And I think maybe more so that's what I mean.
Yeah,
But
I think that's interesting though, just real quick, because like that's why he was the number one pick. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, he can do all the crazy arm angles and make hero plays, but like he's so smart football wise and he thinks the game at such a high level. And I think sometimes when you put the training wheels on a guy like that, it actually like it encumbers them.
yeah,
Whereas like Caleb's like, if I'm in control and I have ownership, I know what's going to happen. And even if I don't call the right protection, I know where the hole is and I can
yeah.
cover for it. And so I think that's been really cool to watch as you like study Chicago, if you're me or Logan getting ready for this game, to see Jaden like Caleb owned that in a larger way.
Yeah, that has been one of the more fun things, that him getting more comfortable in the offense, which, when a rookie quarterback, it takes some time to do that. Is there concern at all? I mean, it's one of the things and clips going around Twitter right now where Jaden just getting lit up in college when because of kind of how much he moves. We saw that here in Chicago with Justin Fields, and Justin Fields is a little thicker than Jaden Daniels, but he had injury after injury because the offense relied so much on him to be able to use his legs. Are there concerns at that at all, or do you think that the offense is balanced enough to where you can, for the most part, be able to keep him okay?
Yeah, I mean, are there concerns? Yes. I have people calling my radio show every day, like needing basically me to act as a therapist. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's football. We can't injury
Yeah,
proof it. And also, Jaden Daniels' durability doesn't care about your feelings. You being, which what I mean is like, you being more concerned and calling the radio show freaking out isn't going to
yeah,
make Jaden Daniels
help
safe. So
him.
you can take a deep breath on that. Your worry is not actually helping things. There definitely, I think, more internally are some concerns. Like they want him to learn how to slide better. That is something
Yeah,
that Dan Quinn has talked about. And like, hey, like let's not take unnecessary hits. Are you guaranteed to get hurt if you take hits? No. Are you guaranteed to stay safe from a hit if you don't take one? Yeah. So let's not
mhm,
take hits. And I think he's gotten better at that. And I think that was kind of the funny thing about the play he got hurt on. Was this the first time he's really been out in the open field like that with nobody
mhm,
in front of him? And he kind of didn't know what to do at the NFL level. And so instead of just like putting his head down and covering up the football or just trying to run away from people, he was kind of looking back and he's trying to stiff arm. And that kind of created the situation where he wound
yeah,
up in this awkward position. And he also made a cut inside there where if he had stayed outside, all the defenders by nature are on one side. And you just know where that hit is going to come from if you get caught, and you're more likely to get pushed out of bounds.
yeah,
And so that there's like some, I think, more specific efficacy coaching points where, hey, if you want to be effective as a scrambler, these are decisions you can make in the open field that can help you stay healthy. But I don't think they're ever going to stop running him. Like he's very, very good at it. And I think the thing is, coming out of college is, hey man, like sometimes you just got to know discretion's the better part of valor, and you
yeah,
don't need to wily coyote yourself into a defensive lineman.
yeah,
And he just sometimes look like a cartoon character getting spun. But there's also plenty of examples of him stepping out of bounds, being smart. And the biggest hit he took in college, the only time he was hurt in college was when Dallas Turner smashed him in the pocket and concussed him. And that
yeah.
happened in the pocket. And so long story short, yes, there's concern. No, I don't know how valid it is. But this was, I think, seen much more as a fluky type of play than it was something that they need to change how they're going to use him moving forward.
Yeah, and that's what I think, that when you're talking about the mobile quarterbacks, you automatically have this extra level of there may be an injury because they're a lot of times leaving the pocket more, they're running more, obviously they're in open field. And so it is interesting. And even with Caleb, it was a conversation because so much of Caleb's game at USC, especially in the Lincoln Riley offense, was spinning around and avoiding pressure in that kind of way, but then taking off and running. And I think that's, if you watched Hard Knocks, they had such a focus on like the slip and slide and sliding
Yeah.
and getting down. And that is something you've seen of Caleb, sometimes almost frustrating in moments because you feel like he could get another 10, 15 yards and he'll slide, but he's protecting himself. And I'm sure that's what the coaches are kind of focusing on right now. The run game. I think that's something also that for a lot of people, some maybe even a little surprised, but I think Brian Robinson's had a really good start to the season, really good games against Arizona and the Giants, I believe it was. But so let's talk about him a little bit, the run game, but also what is affected in the run game with Jaden Daniels not playing if he doesn't play this weekend.
So that's the part that doesn't really change a whole lot because like
Yeah.
Marcus Mariota is a really good runner.
Yeah.
If I'm Chicago, I am trying to force him to be a passer as often as possible because I think I could probably create some turnovers and he's not a very good rhythm passer and we can get into that if you want to. But for the running game, like they will use quarterback run quite a bit this weekend. And our old friend Montez Sweat is probably a huge key to stopping that. He's the athletic freak type of defensive end that makes zone read game impossible because he can
Yeah.
play the dive and the keep. So um, I think the thing with like B Rob is on some level straightforward. He's got good vision. He's enormous and he runs really hard. And so he's always going to the right place with good leverage. And he's 6'2" and he is 235 pounds and he runs really fast. And like tackling that sucks. So
Yeah.
that's the Brian Robinson breakdown on the simplest form. I think the thing that's made it really, really hard is Cliff's run game design is outstanding. And he has been good at that since he was in
Yeah.
college and at Arizona. And he's taken some things that he's done in the spread college system and now applied it to like 3 tight end sets. And you're like, whoa, okay, well, we get in that same formation and get this defensive response. But instead of a 165-pound receiver that I had at Texas Tech making this block, I have, rookie Ben Sinnott out of Kansas
Yeah.
State, who's a behemoth of a blocker, just waylaying a linebacker, then that hole's even bigger. And so
Yeah.
there's been some of that. Bobby Johnson coming from the Brian Dable system and what they did with Josh Allen and Daniel Jones in Buffalo, New York. Some of the Jalen Hurts style quarterback run game from Brian Johnson. So there's a lot of really good minds that are coming together, not to mention Anthony Lynn is their run game coordinator, who obviously was with Kyle Shanahan last year and had been a head coach previously, nevertheless an OC. So there's a lot of really smart minds that have kind of combined in this very cohesive run game. A lot of stuff looks similar. They have good counters off of things. They run every play in the book, guard tackle, pull stuff, counters, traps, whams, inside zone, outside zone, like you name it, they run it. And they do it with straightforward stuff. They do it out of heavy personnel. They do it out of spread. They do it with orbit motions. Like, I don't know how many. I probably people get the point. Like they got
Yeah.
everything,
All of it.
and
Yeah.
I think with the quarterback element, they can attack every blade of grass at all times, and that just makes it really hard to be right as a defense, and especially when some of it's RPO or hey,
Mhm.
we got a bubble called on the backside. You just can't have good numbers to defend all of it, and so teams have to make choices, and at times that's resulted in monster run plays. I do think the way the Bears play like Brisker's down in the box a lot. They play a lot of single high, so they have these heavier boxes. And maybe that causes some of the screens to be thrown and some of the other decisions to be made. And if
Yeah.
I'm Chicago, I'm trying to force that. Like if it's a zone read, I want Mariota keeping it. I don't
Yeah.
want Brian Robinson to have the football. And so I think that there's ways you can do that and then try to cover for it. You scrape linebackers over the top, all that kind of good stuff. And we'll see if Matt Eberflus has all that stuff ready to go. And what counters Cliff has it. And I think the biggest thing I'd be worrying about, though, in the run game from Chicago is there's a lot of explosive runs that have been given up by the Bears this year for as
Yeah.
good as they've been defensively. And Cliff typically gets 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 explosive runs every game, a couple with B Rob. And then Austin Eckler's had like one huge run, it feels like in every single game. And so that's what I'd be worried about if I'm Chicago is okay, cool, you stop him twice, but is that third one going to be a 50-yarder?
Yeah.
And especially, if it's a 40-yard touchdown, that'd be like the fourth or fifth one that the Bears give up this year. And if
Yeah.
I'm Cliff, I'm trying to find that play, especially early on in this game.
I was about to say, definitely, it feels almost like it is a weakness versus a strength because that is probably the weaker point of the Bears is stopping the run. Both interior, when it comes to Devon Dexter and Andrew Billings, are towards the top when it comes to pass rush win rate. And then when you look at the outside with Montez Sweat and Daryl Taylor, they're both at the top of pass rush win rate, but none of them have been able to really stop the ball the way or stop the run the way that you'd want to see. Jaquan Brisker is struggling with a concussion. We don't know if he'll be playing. Kyler Gordon also is battling an injury, so we don't know if he'll be playing. Those are two major pieces of some of those things that they can do up front because you do see when Kyler's in, he'll blitz sometimes. He's all over the place. And you mentioned some of the stuff that Jaquan Brisker can do at a really high level. So that is some things that I think Washington can keep an eye on. A few things out of that. Number one, I was connecting today. So Dan Quinn is just, I feel like a genius when it comes to hiring people. I went back and looked at the 2016 Falcons and
It's
the
crazy.
guy, it was like it was
Raheem Morris,
Morris,
one of the
Mike
LaFleur,
McDaniel,
yeah, Mike
Matt LaFleur.
McDaniel, Jeff Ulbrich. There's like 5 or 6
But
current head coaches on that staff.
yeah,
It's wild.
yeah. And Shanahan was on that.
Yep,
It was insane when I was looking at that. I think both LaFleurs
I
honestly
think
were
you're
on
right.
that at the time. But yeah, so that's something when you look at Clint was kind of somebody that the Bears were looking at a lot this offseason when we were starting to talk about offensive coordinators for obvious reasons. But I think some of it is because of that experience that he has with Caleb from last year. But I do want to talk a little bit about the weapons in general in Washington. I think Terry McLaurin's probably the one that people know the most and like the most. I've been a big fan of Terry McLaurin for a while, and it's fun to me to kind of be able to see him have the season that he's had so far. But when you're talking about some of these other weapons, I'm not sure most people are identifying a Luke McCaffrey and some of those guys, and they know Zach Ertz, but I feel like a lot of people kind of consider that on the tail end of it. So talk about a little bit of the weapons in general outside of that run game.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting the wide receiver group that they have because they kind of hunted skill sets and nobody's like an awesome all-around player, but they know how to use all these guys. And I think they've even figured it out as the years gone on. Like De'Ami Brown's an interesting example. De'Ami's a guy that was brought in like super fast, always a vertical threat. And the reality in his career is he's been the best thing he's done is a block as a wide receiver. And then this year they figured out, oh, he's a pretty good screen runner. Like if we throw the ball to him quickly, he runs really hard and has good vision, and we can get 10 yards pretty regularly by throwing a quick tunnel screen to De'Ami Brown. So, yeah, he's got a big, long touchdown against the Browns, and if you can get him doing some of that stuff, great. But let's use him as a blocker and as a screen runner. Noah Brown has been a great pickup for them after he was cut by the Houston Texans in camp, and he's kind of their bigger body guy. They found ways to make sure that Terry is getting the ball on routes and in areas where he can be really dangerous and creating one-on-one matchups for him on the outside. Even though he's a rookie, Luke McCaffrey has been kind of a guy that Jaden has trusted with specific timing routes. They've spent a lot of time practicing together, so that's something to kind of watch for this week with Marcus, who's not a great rhythm thrower and doesn't have those reps banked necessarily with Luke. And then the kind of wild card has been Olamide Zaccheaus. He's a guy that's floated around the league a little bit. Dan had him in Atlanta, but he's just this quick, twitchy, hard to tackle, shorter, stout guy that just is a powerful guy. And whether it's on some of the quick slants or some of the reverses or screens on his end of it, they found really smart ways to use him. And then Ertz, classic, like, I'm an older veteran tight end safety blanket who just knows how to get open. That's exactly who he is, and nobody can figure out how to cover him because, as Logan says, Zach has a deep understanding of the dark arts of route running. And so I think that the screen game to Eckler's been really impactful. Obviously, Robinson's been used well. And then it's just how they like the biggest thing with Cliff is the formations. And you'll see some funky ones. You'll see four guys to a side. You'll see bunches and stacks. They just find ways to create space and matchups, and they do it differently than a lot of the West Coast systems. And this is kind of the cool thing for me about working with Logan, because Logan's with Kyle for a long time and knows that West Coast system inside and out. And there was a play earlier this year where, Logan told me, he's like, it's the same concept we ran with Kyle in San Francisco, but instead of like using this motion and we got to pull this backer here, Cliff just lined it up with two backs next to Jaden and said on snap, they just went, running away from the quarterback, like two flat routes, like swing screen type of routes. And what did the flat defenders do? Moved right out of the way. We don't make it fancy. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the easiest way to do it? And some of the designs that have worked in the NFL for a long time, meeting kind of that simplicity of what Cliff does, really creates great space in this offense for guys. And I think the one thing that if I'm Chicago, I'm a little concerned about, although Chicago's fantastic defensively, but they are kind of vanilla and kind of simplistic in what they do. They're just really, really good at it, which can be very, very, very effective. I mean, that's what Quinn did for years in Seattle. Yeah. But when Cliff and on the other side of the ball, Joe Jr. have kind of been on what the other coordinator is doing, they've been really, really effective this year in calling the right stuff at the right time. And that's what I kind of wonder. If Washington's offense is going to be the first team to score 21 on the Chicago team in 13 games, it's going to be because Cliff is on it. And in key situations, he knows exactly what Flus is going to call. And he calls, say it's a cover 3, he'll call the cover 3 beater and Marcus happens to hit it on that particular down.
Yeah, and it will be, that matchup is going to be interesting. And I think a second ago I said Clint because I was thinking Kubiak. Obviously, I meant Cliff Kingsbury. Yeah. But that is another storyline here. And there's many. We were talking about Austin Eckler and obviously Keenan Allen and Gerald Everett on the Bears side of the ball. So several former Chargers that all left this offseason in this game. But Cliff worked at USC, obviously, as an offensive analyst last year with Caleb. What has his kind of take this week and comments on Caleb been so far?
Yeah, I mean, he's tried to stay away from it for the most part. But anytime he's talked about Caleb, he's been super complimentary. He's just said like, I love the kid. He's really really smart, super talented. Was great to work with. Cliff likes talking about certain stuff and really doesn't like. He kind of, I don't want to say shuts it down. Like he's never rude, but he's just kind of like,
Mhm.
yeah, there's no real benefit to me talking about this, and so he's
Yeah.
kind of straightforward. And so he's super complimentary. I think he really enjoyed it. He hasn't really been super extensive in anything that I've seen about Caleb, either back in the spring or anytime it's come up. And then anything that I saw that came out of the press conference on Thursday, there wasn't too extensive, although there might have been an answer I missed on that.
Yeah, and I think on the Bear side, a lot of fans are like, "Well, does he have something? Like, is he going to be able to kind of game plan around Caleb better because of it?" I will say that Caleb is playing a much different type of football than he did at USC a lot, just because we mentioned it at the top, kind of what they did there. He had to play hero ball a lot, and here it's been more so almost game manager ish in certain moments where I'm like, this is fun to see him complete these like short, intermediate, midfield, quick passes that you just didn't really see. He had one of the longest times to throw in college football and now has been able to get the ball out in like 2.3, 2.4 seconds this year. So it is very different, but it will be interesting. A couple more. I told you I'd keep you 20, so I'm a little over, but I do want to talk about the defense a little bit because there's obviously identifiable names on Washington's defense. When you talk about a Deron Payne and you talk about a Jonathan Allen and you talk about Bobby Wagner, obviously. I'm familiar with Dante Fowler because I also cover the Jags, but tell us a little bit about that defense, the defensive front, and because I want to start there. The defensive front. What are the thoughts there so far? Because Washington's had moments where they've been exposed a little bit, but then they've had moments where you feel like they're trending in the positive direction.
This is a bend but don't break defense, and it starts with their front. And Allen had started to finally play a little bit better before he tore his pec a couple weeks ago. So he's out, and they're trying to figure out what the best guy to replace him is. I think the best guy is Fedarian Mathis, and we saw that last week. Johnny Newton's their second round pick. He's a little bit undersized, missed a lot of camp, so he's still trying to figure out how to play as a pro, especially on first and second down against the run. Where Fedarian Mathis is just, I mean, the man's nickname is Big Phil. He's
Yeah.
huge. And so they can stop the run way better with him in there. And that's, I think, probably what they do is pair him with Deron Payne, try to let Deron go make plays. And then, your old friend Dante Fowler, like
Yeah.
he was sensational last week. First career interception, by the way, pick six,
Oh, wow.
67-yarder. Love that. But just on a botched screen situation. But he is really rushing very well right now. And I think that matchup against Darnell Wright is one of the key ones. Dorrance Armstrong's also started to play a little bit better. He missed last week. So if he can come back, that adds some depth there. And then there's kind of a wild card in the front that I'm very curious about this week, which is their rookie fifth rounder, I believe it was, Jordan McGee, has been
Mhm.
out all year. But he is active this week for the first time coming off IR. And the reason that's important, he's a linebacker, played
Mhm.
middle linebacker at Temple, but super speedy, like rides with violence, a Dan Quinn style player. And I kind of think they want to get Frankie Louvu, who's been really good for them
Yeah.
and one of their big signings this offseason, on the edge more. They blitz him a ton. He's kind of their, they're not similar players, but they play similar roles. Like he's their Micah Parsons for what they
Okay.
used Micah for in Dallas. And Micah obviously eventually just wound up as a full-time lineman. And even though he would stand up, like he's just blitzing everywhere. And so you'll see Frankie Louvu line up over your center, over your right guard, over your left guard. Like he'll blitz from anywhere. They'll pick a matchup. But because McGee is back, I think Luvu is going to play more on the edge more, which I
Mhm.
think is interesting both against the run and in pass rush situations. I think it could free them up to do a little bit more zone blitz type of stuff where they can keep 7 in coverage, but still rush 4 and then hopefully create a couple of problems in the pass rush. Because that's kind of been the thing is a couple of games, they've had really nice rushes. Other
Mhm.
games, it's been totally non-existent.
Yeah.
And the ability to kind of contain the pocket, collapse it down on Caleb, and maybe make him rush a couple throws, I think is the big key. And then obviously how they play against the run, where they have given up big runs, but they also are one of the best stuff teams. So they might give up a 20-yarder, but then they get you on the next time for -2, and now you're second and 12. And that's kind of the bend but don't break measure of it all.
Yeah, and first of all, Johnny Newton was one of the guys I was eyeing big time in the draft this year for both the Bears and the Jags. So I like to see that you're seeing success out of him at this level pretty early on. I think that when it comes to the Bears defense, which we've talked about a lot of the positives in it, and another positive is their red zone defense has been lights out for the majority of it. And you can go beyond this last year. We talked about no team scoring more than 21 in the I think 12 state, but I guess it's
Yep.
13 weeks. And so you're going back to last year, and that's against really good opponents like the Lions and the Packers towards the end of the year. So it will be interesting to see these two kind of match up. And like again, I'm repeating myself, but I really do wish Jaden's out there because I just will feel like it'll add an extra element and test both sides. But before I let you go, because we talked about the defensive front, the secondary for Washington, because you are going against we're talking about Caleb Williams, but a lot of weapons. I mean, you're going from DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet, who's one of the better tight ends in the league right now through the first 7 weeks. And then you add Roma Dunze in there. You add DeAndre Swift, who in every game the Bears have won has had multiple 10+ yard runs. And you also use him in the receiving game. And so there's so many factors into this offense. What do you think that Washington's most game planning around when it comes to that?
Yeah. This is tough because, as Commanders fans well know, and as Bear fans love to remind anybody here in DC, DJ Moore put up 75,000 yards on this team last year and scored 42 touchdowns. Yeah, he's nasty. And I don't think that they have a great matchup for him because I don't know how many exist because he's that good. Keenan Allen's great. I mean, Benjamin St. Juice, I think from a size perspective is okay, but like sometimes Juice really struggles with really precise route runners. And obviously Keenan Allen is a route running czar. So this is where I'm terrified for the Washington side of it. Like they have to get a pass rush. They have to find ways to get pressure, not leave their guys in coverage. I would probably play a ton of zone and just like make Caleb make a ton of decisions that aren't which matchup do I want? Because the matchups don't favor Washington, and that is a much easier lift for a quarterback. And so how do you mix up your zones? You play some 2, you play some 6, you play some 3. You're going to have to play some man some, but you got to find ways to mix up the zone coverages. And I would probably show some light boxes and invite the Bears to run the football and then just hope you do a good job. If you can do a good job, great. Because Swift's not the best runner. He is dangerous though. Like he's a guy that his vision is not great, but if you get him out in space and he hits it, you're not going to catch him. And so that boom bust nature of him scares me. DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze scare me. Like Rome wouldn't scare me as much if he was a 2 or a 1 for them. But as a 3, like, oh, man. And then, yeah, Kmet, I mean, they don't have a great solution all the time against tight ends. Like their safeties are pretty solid. But the thing is, like, this defense hits, they're fast, they fly around. The longer that it's a game, the better I feel about them. If I'm Chicago, I want to jump out early. I want to make Marcus into a drop back passer and, you know, just try to run the football all day long. And that's where Washington's its worst. But this is a defense that if they get a little confidence, I think can compete. But it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing when we're talking about this Bears defense because the last 2 weeks, both weeks, I kind of talked about I go across the line in the pass rush and the secondary, obviously, because Jalen Johnson and what Tyreek Stevenson's been able to do. And Kevin Byard's probably one of the more underrated signings this offseason. And I almost always forget to mention Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, but the linebackers here in Chicago are so good too. Like what Tremaine can do in the middle of the field and in that intermediate range is just fantastic. So it is a lot of tests. Like I said, I think the run game is where Washington probably should focus, but I really appreciate it, Craig. I know you got to go. You have some interviews to get going to, so I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good weekend or a good rest of your week.
Thanks, Taylor. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and appreciate you having me.
Yep, no problem. Have a good one.